Welcome to this week's 2-Minute Warning feature interview, where we take a deeper dive into the energy transition happening in the Middle East and beyond. My name is Tomas Valdez. I'm a senior associate at Gulf Intelligence, and I'm delighted to have His Excellency Sunjay Sudhir here with me today. His Excellency is Indian Ambassador to the United Arab Emirates and India's permanent representative to the International Renewable Energy Agency. Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us.
Nice to be in your show. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. To kick it off, I'll say that there are a lot of positive stories that are describing India's progress towards renewables. For the world's largest economies across the board, providing affordable energy to all of its citizens is an understandably daunting challenge. Yet India seems to be well on its way in its transition to clean energy. Can you describe to us India's energy transformation strategy?
Well, there's a lot happening in India as far as energy transition is concerned. India's renewable power capacity is already the fourth largest in the world. India's total non-fossil fuel-based installed capacity stands at around 170 gigawatts, which is about 42% of the total installed power generation capacity as in September this year. We have a total installed capacity of about a little over 400 gigawatts, of which 42% is renewable. Under the Paris Climate Agreement, we had pledged to achieve about 40% cumulative electric power generation capacity from non-fossil fuels by 2030. We have already achieved this target 9 years ahead of schedule, and I'm very happy to share with you this. Now, India has enhanced its NDC commitments to achieve about 50% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy sources by 2030. So this is the enhanced target which we have set for ourselves. India is ranked 10th, which means India falls in the category of high performance in the Climate Change Performance Index 2021, published by German Watch, along with Climate Action Network and New Climate Institute. Among the G20 countries, perhaps it's only the United Kingdom which is ranked ahead of India at number 5. In 2014, solar tariffs were around 7 rupees per unit. 7 rupees means about 8.5 cents, and wind tariffs were about 4.3 cents, which have now fallen to 2.4 cents and 3.4 cents respectively. India was the only G20 country whose 2015 NDCs were rated as 2 degrees Celsius compatible by the Climate Action Tracker till August 2021. Even though the tracker has changed its rating methodology since September last year, India's policies and actions are still rated 2 degrees Celsius compatible as on date.
And given those modified targets that you mentioned and the progress and the strides that India has made, India nevertheless still imports more than 80% of its oil, over 50% of its gas currently, and that's still a huge amount. And in Europe, for example, that dependency, especially in gas, has brought a big lesson for countries like Germany that have been highly dependent on Russian imports. Is this sort of dependency something that has raised concerns for the Indian government?
You are very right when you say that India still imports more than 80% of its oil and over 50% of its gas. We are not, unfortunately, we are not as well resourced in terms of hydrocarbon reserves. But I must say that all the same, being the largest population, about 1.4 billion, and also the 5th largest economy, which means huge requirements for our economic development, energy security is a very high priority. The recent experiences, as you just mentioned, have, I think, forced everyone to consider options on diversifying energy sourcing as well as to reduce dependency on one source. We have actually been doing diversification of our sourcing for a very long time. You will be very happy to hear that if I show you a list of our 10 top sources of crude imports, they go across the globe. They are Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Nigeria, Venezuela, Kuwait, UAE, Mexico, Angola, Kazakhstan, and Russia. So you'll see that it's a very, very diversified basket already. In terms of LNG, as you said, we import more than 50% of our gas requirements. Our top few sources I would share is Australia, followed by Qatar, and then the US, Russia, Malaysia, Nigeria, Indonesia. So we have made it a conscious policy for ourselves to diversify our hydrocarbon sourcing. Not only that, so we also have acquired assets overseas, and we have for the moment we have about 52 hydrocarbon assets, again with a very impressive geographical dispersal. In India, we also have a very ambitious program for strategic petroleum reserves. The first phase is already completed, and we have recently launched phase 2 of the strategic petroleum reserves.
And as this energy diversification progresses, as the demand for renewables increases, sourcing the raw materials and the production for those technologies will also become a challenge. But in that regard, India seems to be well positioned. Can you tell us a little bit about India's approach to renewables manufacturing and how well prepared it is to meet that growing demand for the billion plus population and country?
You are spot on, but Government of India is very conscious. Not only conscious, they've taken very proactive stance on these things, and I must share a few things with you. Government has launched the framework for India's transition to cleaner energy for the period 2021 to 2030. Other initiatives have also been launched, like tax concessions and incentives, such as the production-linked incentive scheme for promotion of manufacturing and adoption of renewable energy. These initiatives will provide an opportunity for enhancing India's manufacturing capabilities and also for enhancing exports. It will lead to an overall increase in green jobs, such as in renewable energy, clean energy industries and automotives, manufacturing of low emission products like electric vehicles and super efficient appliances, as well as innovative technologies such as green hydrogen. Just to share one example in this, Government of India has launched production-linked incentive scheme, the first tranche, on national program on high efficiency solar PV modules in April last year, with a huge outlay of about, in this amount, I'll mention the rupee amount in that, about 4,500 crore Indian rupees. Now in September this year, Government of India has launched the second tranche with an equally impressive outlay of about 20,000 crores for achieving and manufacturing gigawatt scale in high efficiency solar PV modules. So all these things are happening, and also wanted to share with you that we are working with a lot of partner countries, including the United Arab Emirates. You would have seen that recently one of the big funds in the UAE invested about $2 billion in Adani Energy, which is mainly on renewables. There's also a big investment from the UAE funding agencies into the Indian startup sector, many of whom focus on renewables. So much is happening in India, and that's why that gives us the confidence of not only meeting our NDCs, but also making a very positive and a big contribution to green energy transition.
And with these enhancements to manufacturing, coupled with investments both domestically and abroad, India has stated that it has a target of having at least 50% of its electricity provided via renewables by 2030. What are some of the challenges that India has to overcome to meet that goal, and which renewables do you think that target would involve?
Well, India is very much on track to reach its targets. Like I shared earlier, India's total non-fossil fuel-based installed capacity stands at around 170 gigawatts, which is about 42% of the total installed power generation capacity. We chose this target ourselves since we achieved our commitments for 40% electricity from renewables 6 years ahead of schedule. In India, we have the decentralized renewable energy concept, which is developing very fast. The government has issued a framework for promotion of decentralized renewable energy livelihood applications in February this year to facilitate development of an enabling ecosystem for widespread access and adoption of DRE livelihood applications, particularly in rural and remote areas in the entire country. As you're aware, India is not only a huge country, but the topography is very, very diverse. The demography, again, is very, very diverse. So that presents its challenges, but at the same time, the government is well prepared and has already planned it out ahead with things like promotion of decentralized renewable energy.
And moving the focus a little bit towards the international stage, it's very timely that we're having this discussion right now, considering that COP is happening in Egypt this month. With regards to climate diplomacy, India is a leader for the developing world at the COP negotiating table, which is part of the United Nations framework on climate change. What are your expectations for COP27 in Egypt and COP28 that the UAE will host next year? And especially with next year's COP that is happening so close to India, is there any particular approach that India is taking to get prepared for that COP in the UAE?
I would just beg to differ a bit because India is not just a leader for the developing world. India is also shown the way to the developed world. Because I just mentioned to you about facts and figures of India counting as the high performance country, perhaps among the two best in G20 ranked at number 10. Only UK is ahead at number 5. So India is showing the way, as I just mentioned. We are very conscious of our commitments, and that's why government has laid out a clear roadmap for renewables and also achieved it ahead of schedule. Government has also laid out a very clear national green hydrogen mission, which Prime Minister announced in August 2021. And the stated goal is to make India the global hub of green hydrogen production and export. As far as COP27 is concerned, it's already ongoing, and our Environment Minister, Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, is representing India. And there we hope a lot of productive outcomes which are geared towards a realistic energy transition, a transition which is fair to all and which also takes into consideration the challenges which may come in our way, which calls for investment, which calls for developing global policies so that countries can follow and smoothen the energy transition. As far as COP28 is concerned, again, we are looking forward to COP28. This is happening in the UAE. Our leadership is already in touch on this. Our energy ministers are already in touch on this. And we are trying to work together to come up, to make our contribution for a very positive agenda so that the world can become a better place.
And with India seeking to be a leader, not only for the developing world, but for the planet in general, and against this backdrop of COP27 in Egypt, COP28 in the UAE next year, how can partnerships at the international level, at the global scale, help India progress on this transition road?
Well, I think today the world is all about partnerships. I think COVID has taught us a big lesson that by ourselves, there's nothing much we can achieve unless we work together. I think that has been a big lesson. Similarly, for global issues like climate change, we need to work together. But we need to have an approach which is realistic and which takes into consideration the challenges and the priorities of vast majority of global population. I think that's very important. And to meet that end, India has always been very happy and very keen to work with countries across the globe. We have led by example. I've just given you some figures, and we will continue to take that leading role. Our Prime Minister himself is a big champion of green energy and a smooth energy transition. So since we have our leader to show us the way, I think all is going well.
And in addition to this leadership status that India is seeking, and these partnerships that are forming all across the globe, not only because of climate change, but also because the pandemic incentivized these new partnerships to form, given the current geopolitical situation where a lot of the world is focused now on more short-term energy security that relies on coal and that relies on oil and more conventional and traditional forms of energy. How can countries now balance the priorities between these short-term energy security needs and this trajectory and this movement towards more investments into the renewable space and toward that transition into the renewable space?
See, as far as energy security is concerned, it's a long-term concept. And it's a concept in which everybody has to work together. What we have been always saying is that energy should be there at affordable prices. And the prices should be such which balance out the interests of both the producers and the consumers, so that the consumers get energy at affordable prices, at good prices, whereas the producers get the prices which incentivize further investment in energy, whether it's hydrocarbons, whether it's crude or gas, or even the investment going into renewables. I'm very well aware that renewables will need a lot of investment, but till the time we reach there, the reliance on hydrocarbons will continue. So we should not see renewables and hydrocarbons as a zero-sum game. We should actually look at cleaner hydrocarbons. We should look at natural gas as an important fuel which can fuel the transition to a better world. I think that is very important.
Certainly, yeah, lots happening with the transition, with balancing security, with looking at energy security as a long-term need as well. Definitely lots of balls in the air and a lot of things happening at the international level. With that, we'll have to wrap it up. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us today. And we really appreciate your expertise and your time, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and namaste to you and your audience.